Hello Year 9, time for the revision podcast for you guys for your China module so far. So this is going to cover what we did in lessons 2, 3 and 4 and a bit beyond that. So first of all, we're looking at China, aren't we? So we looked at China and we started off by looking at the physical geography. Now what I mean by that is mountains, I mean rivers, I mean the coast. I don't mean by cities and restaurants and towns. It's all about the physical geography. Now, in terms of what we started with was rivers. So China has thousands of rivers. The Yellow River, for example, is that way because of the yellow silt, and that's kind of like little rocks and sand that it carries. This can cause flooding when it deposits those materials as it travels downwards. The River Yangtze, the world's third longest river, is really busy, and how this river is used is normally for trade and transport. There's lots of ships and boats here. There's also a dam. And the River Xi is another example of a flood. It's very busy. It flows to the Pearl River Delta, one of China's top industrial factory areas. That's physical geography, but also the climate. Because it's so big, because it's such a large country, it covers a large latitude, China has a range of climates. The north is colder. The south is warmer. The south is tropical. The north is subarctic. You have the plateau of Tibet. It's very cold up there. It's very high up. The higher altitude you go, the colder it gets. That's why when you're in a plane, it gets colder as you go into the clouds. So, higher up altitude, increased altitude, means it's colder. And you also have land that heats up faster than the sea in the summer, and it heats the air, and you can get monsoon winds from the sea, bringing plenty of monsoon rains from the southeast. This map right here is the physical geography map, and it shows on the eastern side the Himalayas, for example. It shows the Gobi Desert and the plateau of Tibet, whereas on the right hand side, so the northeast and the east and the southeast towards Hong Kong, it's where the cities like Shanghai and the capital Beijing are. So in the west, it's physical, it's colder, it's higher up, it's more altitude, it's mountains, it's deserts, and in the kind of southeast, it's the big cities. China also gets cold deserts as well, depending on where they are. And there's also an earthquake risk. So near the Himalayas, there in the southwest, you can see them. That's where plates are pushing together. They push up, and that can actually have devastating impacts. In fact, one earthquake in 1976 killed over 250,000 people. Okay, so we looked at where it is in Asia. China's in Asia. Countries around it include like India, so it's north of India, it's west of Japan, it's south of Mongolia, for example. We looked at what relief meant. So relief meant about how the land varies in height. So mountains are high up, and by the sea it's flat. And we also looked at ultimately cities tend to be near the coast. The reason for this is because of water access, but also because it's close to ports, and ports means jobs, ports means trading goods, importing and exporting things. That's why people tend to live on the coast, which is what we did in our third lesson. So I showed you that climate map on the first lesson, and I showed you the human map on the second lesson. So cities like Shanghai, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Beijing are all near the coast, all near the eastern coast. Okay, countries are divided up, and not everywhere has the same amount of people in there. Okay, on the map on the right, that map from the diagram before, from your textbook on page 34, in some areas, in the Henan, for example, it has about 99 million people, whereas in Tibet, by the mountains, only 2.8 million people. China's population is 1.3 billion, and it's going down slightly as a result of historical changes. But Hong Kong and Macau are both examples of territories owned by Britain and Portugal, respectively. But they have both been returned to China in 1999 because China promised to let them govern themselves. In terms of the people in China, because obviously we're looking at the human aspects now, the people in China. China has 56 ethnic groups. 92% of the population belong to a group called the Han. There's 55 minority groups, including the Sani of southern China, Mongolians of northern China, and the Tibetans of Tibet. But most ethnic groups live in an autonomous region. What that means is they have some level of independence. They are their own people. Tibet is an example of an autonomous region. It was almost a separate country for a while, and obviously Buddhism is massive there. China has 7 languages, each with many different dialects. Mandarin is the most famous, but they also have Cantonese as well. And the Mandarin dialect of Beijing is China's official language that all people must learn at school. So we looked at what population density means. Population density is the number of people living in a certain area. It's high in the east, it's low in the west, high by the cities and the coast, low in the mountains and the colder parts. People don't live in areas that are hilly, they live in areas that are flat. People don't live in areas far away from the river or water source, they live near them. They live in the sensible climates too. And that was us looking at the human aspect. They did your quiz. And then we looked at how China is changing. Because we know the population of China right now is actually decreasing. We looked at, people live in the cities because of facilities, jobs, activities, accessibility, trains and bus networks, better money. As a result, though, however, people live in Beijing. Not everywhere has the same amount of people, and therefore not everywhere has the same amount of money, introducing the concept of inequality. Okay, so inequality is not a great thing for China, because overall, some areas have more people than others. Okay? That money affected China because some areas are really, really, really wealthy and other areas are fairly poor in comparison. This means there's lots of poverty. Lots of poverty means that people maybe haven't got as good healthcare. People maybe live very long in some places and don't live well in others. And then we looked at the concept of GDP for your homework. Now, GDP means gross domestic product. In other words, it's the total value of all the goods and services from a country. And China's is fairly good. But don't forget, some areas in China are very, very wealthy and some areas are very, very poor. So it averages out. And China has got more wealthy over time, although it is very much still developing. It's got very, very many people in it, but that number's coming down. Population is less than India, for example. And people are not distributed evenly. The spread of people across the place, distribution, is uneven. And people in rural China do jobs like farming, which pay less than people who work in business in the city, for example. And then we covered, or if you haven't done this lesson yet, we will cover, about how China was the world's most developed and wealthy country at one point, and now it's developing. So, 200 years ago, it had the world's largest economy. This was due to technology. It built canals, it moved crops, it moved water to where crops were. The officials were only chosen by exams, and only the best got through. And also, China has a very good amount of natural resources like, silk, tea, porcelain, and also silver. However, from maybe the 1800s onwards, the Industrial Revolution process, countries in Western Europe developed rapidly, and the UK made everything there. Goods from its factories were sold everywhere. So in China, it got left behind. The Industrial Revolution didn't spread to China. Instead, China got invaded, and there was conflict, there was war, and it fell behind. And then it was poorly governed. Under Chairman Mao, in the 20th century, the 1900s, China did develop some industry, but it was shut off for the world for quite a lot of that. So it spent the late 1990s and 2000s catching up. It's driven by manufacturing. A lot of things that you see in this world are made in China, made in factories in China, because it's quite cheap to make things there. And now they're trading with the rest of the world and making money as a result of that. So Chinese people are now free to own business and have factories. And then in 2007, they became the world's largest exporter of goods. China can sell goods more cheaply than most countries because it has lower wages, and it also has a huge workforce. It has 80 million people working in factories alone. That's more than the amount of people that live in the UK in total. In the UK, there's only 3 million people working in